firm providing a wide range of services and capabilities to investors all over the world, managing trillions of dollars of investments. And I'll pass it down to Dawn.
I'm Dawn Ray Hutchinson. I'm director of Urban Outfitters, head of security there. We operate about 515 stores globally. We have a retail, direct, and wholesale business lines. Urban Outfitters is a public company. We've been public for about 20 years, so our regulatory environment comes both from the PCI and from survey firms.
Hi, I'm Devesh Mukherjee, Senior Director of Park Strategy and Marketing at Coney. Coney is basically an end-to-end mobility platform that does design, development, management, and mobile applications. We pretty much service about 350 customers or so in about 48 countries across the globe, typically working with very large-scale transactions and transmissions. So companies like Citigroup, Marriott, these are all of our customers for their mobile labs.
Hi, I'm Rob Hilliard, the CTO of Reader's Digest. I'm sure all of you have heard of Reader's Digest, either from a bathroom or elderly loved one.
If you look at, for instance, the concept of even IT is clearly starting to give, let's say, as the back-end side, the infrastructure side, more over to, for instance, shadow IT as the boxes and the drop boxes are out there. Certainly they're giving that level of control, but the point is very, very valid. The customer, especially in the consumer space, doesn't care if Dropbox fails or if their data is lost. The truth of the matter is IT essentially has to start to really understand it. If I can't control the infrastructure space as well, how well can I control the data itself or whatever I'm transmitting? So the encryption values, the VPN connections, whatever it might be, the data centers inside. And I think at this point in time, that's the level of security that's going to initially happen before there's going to be a play as to, who's going to control the infrastructure space. Is it going to be Amazon or Rackspace that really gets to control it, or am I going to have more control over that? And am I willing to give it to them?
We also talked about this morning.
So I think the real question it begins with is, what do you define as mobile? Certainly today it's smartphones, feature phones, and tablets, but what does that mean for the future? Is mobile still in that kind of a realm, or does it expand to wearables, does it expand to cars, home automation systems, refrigerators, whatever you can think of, essentially? And for us to understand that is, clearly there's two different spaces. There's the consumer space, and then there's the enterprise space, and they vary differently in how they approach the idea of new mobile technology. So the consumer space will certainly, in my view, will adopt this space, so that maybe the urban outfitters or the retail chain will certainly need to grab a hold and try these new types of devices out, whatever they might be, because consumers are fickle. You need to be on the cutting edge, and if you're not, you're going to lose revenue. So, Google Glass, watches, those types of things will certainly be tried out in the consumer space. The enterprise space is a bit more reluctant. They don't know if they're going to invest right away. They have to potentially watch that market and see how it happens, and is there use cases for it? Am I going to access my SAP information, my SharePoint information via a glass? Even though what really essentially happens is, if you look at kind of the 2007 market, smartphones in the enterprise space were very much BlackBerrys, because there was a much strong security value around that. They had something called the Bed server, which was very, very secure. BYOD never even occurred. And then the iPhone came out in 2007, and everything in the paradigm changed. But the iPhone essentially grabbed a hold of the consumer space. It was the consumer saying, this phone is a better experience than what you're providing me in the BlackBerry, and it started to push that device into the market for the enterprise space. So, and then BYOD was born, and obviously that took hold. Is that true of glasses and watches? Not necessarily the case. Again, if the consumer starts to want to use those types of applications on a glass, then the enterprise will have to take focus. Enterprise will initially invest. They'll certainly try these things out, but they won't make full-fledged investments until there's a true use case for productivity, efficiency with these types of devices. And just to finish up, there would be, the way that really happens is, these things start with ecosystems. So glasses and watches and what have you, you need to have a developer community, you need to have apps built, and you need to have use cases for them to start to become viral. And then obviously that trickles down into the enterprise space from there.
So I haven't, go ahead.
I was just going to say that part of the sorry.
So one of the things I was thinking about with mobile is also authentication. That's
less stringent on what they wish to share. They're very open to these types of things. But that's the consumer space. In the enterprise space, you deal with, again, with the cloud and those types of technologies. Encryption and who manages that data? Are you compliant with FIPS? Are you compliant with PCI? It all has to happen on the back end side. It can never infringe, even in the enterprise space, the user. All of the security that has to be done in a method that's completely elusive or can't be seen, especially by the user. So when we do things such as encryption, when we use things on the cloud, when we use back-end services, connect to SAP, and whatever it might be, all of that infrastructure, how much data, how much processing that's being done, how it's being flown, can never infringe on the user experience. And if you do that, then these security models will continue to happen. And it's to be honest, it's a losing game. There's always going to be someone who's going to be able to beat it. There's always going to be a target kind of infringement that's going to happen. So it's a losing battle, and you have to keep trying it and not infringe the user experience if you do it.
I think one of the things you're seeing, though, is
Are we providing, let's say, X service or Y service? Am I getting the analytics behind it? Am I getting the management tools necessarily behind it? And you have to understand who is exactly responsible when any part of this project might fail, whether it's the data, whether it's the user experience, whether it's the security and infrastructure behind it. But the key is completely involving each one of these key stakeholders in every aspect of the project and involving IT security throughout the entire life cycle of the project.
This just reminded me too, as we're talking about
And it's kind of a question. I feel in the consumer space, certainly, IT has far less control because, again, it's about getting to your user, and they're fickle, and you obviously don't control that ecosystem, and they can leave. So basically, you can only control what you can, which is, again, the data, the information that you disseminate on these types of devices. You can't do device management, for instance, in a consumer space. Enterprise space is exactly that. It's a large degree very, very different, where IT has, to be honest, has a very big say in the projects that I've seen as to what can be disseminated, what types of apps are going to be built, and how they're going to be built. They get involved even in the development process and the design process and saying, look, you have to put in policies and procedures into this app before you release it to our sales group or marketing group, and you have to let me control, for instance, if they send PDF files, and you have to encrypt them, or this app can't go out. Actually, if you even look at mobility as a whole, the concept of EMM or enterprise mobile management, enterprise stores or enterprise app stores, which is completely oblivious from app stores and commercial stores, were created because IT made that point that said, look, I need to control the apps that are going to go on people's devices. They just can't download them. And these were objectives that they stated well into the beginning or the middle of the project that impacted when that project or that app would go out. I think they have a very good amount of influence, especially in the enterprise space, for these reasons. But you have to work with them, and that's the idea, is to get their input involved, but it can't affect your timelines. It can't, you needed to work with your timelines, essentially, as to when you need to get these apps out.
So actually, that's an interesting point. I'm kind of curious. So how many of you feel fairly confident that you can control the apps that go on your mobile devices of your employees?
Wow, that's interesting.
Will IT or will a business start to use these devices? And what's the use case. So if I bring in a new device or whatever it might be, is there relevance to it? Does it make it, for instance, if I bring in a glass or a watch or whatever it might be, and say, hey, we should use this. Okay, well, what's the use case? Why? All right, I'm sales or whatever it might be. I'm never in the field. I know I can be more productive. I can be more efficient if I can access whatever my back-end system is or whatever to do my job better. If it starts with the use case, then you start to involve the IT as the way I typically see it as to, okay, there's a use case for this. This helps us be productive. This helps us be efficient. Is iOS CarPlay in my Volkswagen going to make me more productive? Okay, if you can prove that to me, and there's a use case for it, then fine. Now start to involve IT. Okay, IT, how do we make this secure? If we're going to do this, how do we approach this from our ecosystem? Can we conform? We have to change. We have to buy new servers. We have to do new infrastructure. What's the cost of it? It's never just, both are involved right away. I always feel that it's always, first prove to me what you're trying to do with this new device, this innovation, and when you bring it into the office, just like the iPhone was, and the tablet and those types of things. And then let's start to see how we can make our infrastructure or our ecosystem, IT, conform to this device or whatever it might be.
So to that point about CarPlay,
There and share information, and I love hearing these statistics about 50 million devices jump on that bandwagon and say, yeah, that's the future. I certainly think there's an aspect of it, but things that stymie this type of growth are obviously security, geopolitical issues, socioeconomic issues, governance, regulation. All of these types of things will, I think, certainly have an effect. I mean, just because Jeff Bezos of Android wants to build drones and everyone says, let's use drones, doesn't mean the FAA is going to approve it. It doesn't mean we're all going to be delivering, packages to our house without there having to be some sort of governance around that. And maybe that stymies the growth of using drones or whatever it might be in the future. So certainly the idea of everything being interconnected is a concept that I certainly think will take hold. Just the scope and the scale and how much that growth is what I certainly question. Will enterprise spaces, will B2C places use these devices? Absolutely. I certainly think the consumer space will be the first ones to start taking these devices, but I don't think it'll be at the adoption rate that we seem to think it might be. It's lovely to think that, but again, there's many questions you have to ask yourselves. Energy, how will these things, how will we supply battery power for these types of things? And the biggest question of all is what we've been talking about, security. How will I secure this? Will I use the cloud? Will I use back-end infrastructure? How will I encrypt? All of those types of things I think will affect the answers to that question.
If I knew what the next big disruptive technology was going to be, I would be sitting here. So I can't even begin to speculate on how new devices will come to market, how users will use them, how my customers will interact with them in stores. And I think that, perhaps this is a bit idealistic, but I like to think that we're all moving kind of in this together. This is why we have events like this, is that these new things kind of hit us, and we all have to have a good group think about how we're going to adopt and secure them. But at the end of the day, it comes down to your business, your sector, the risks in your business and your sector, because for some of us, some of these new disruptive technologies won't impact us at all. And for some of us, we're thinking, oh my gosh, what do we do with that? I can't even begin to think what I'm going to do with that. But the core premise of security is knowing what's important to your company and protecting that. And if you keep your focus on that, this is important, the eye in the back of your head, if you keep your focus on that, then all of these new technologies can come and join your world, and your customers and your employees can use them effectively, as long as you're keeping focus on the core of your business, what it is that people do, and what drives or makes your money, and that's most likely your information.
Lifestyle. I find this funny because we had this conversation at lunch. Ultimately, I myself have opted into so many things, whether it's my hobbies or whatever it might be, and didn't think twice about it. And again, millennials and those typically don't care until it infringes. And when it infringes is, for instance, if I'm walking around my phone and I've opted into things maybe a week or two ago, if I now start seeing ads about my hobbies, let's say I like golf or I like tennis, and those start to appear on my app, whatever app I'm starting to use, all of a sudden now